Did you come to Buddhism or Buddhist practices to find more happiness in your life? We'll discuss Buddhism and happiness coming right up. I'm Doug Smith. I'm director at the Online Dharma Institute. That's onlinedharma.org. If you're new to the channel and interested in living a wiser and a kinder and a calmer life, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're interested in getting a new mini course, a free mini course on kindness, calm, wisdom, check out the link at our onlinedharma.org where you can pick that up and check out other courses that I have available over there. I think a lot of us, and perhaps you too, come to early Buddhism or Buddhism in general to look for more happiness in our lives. It's something that we all do. But if we look at the teachings of early Buddhism, we don't really find a whole lot of discussion of happiness. Instead, what we find is a discussion of meditation, of ethics, and of wisdom. These sort of overarching topics, but what do they all have to do with happiness? Now, these early texts do talk about things like joy and bliss, but where do joy and bliss leave off and happiness start? Isn't there some difference between the two? I think in English there is. There is a pretty important difference between joy and bliss on the one hand and happiness on the other. To an extent, this is a problem of translation because the words that are used in the original texts and the Pali texts about these topics can be translated either way, and indeed have been translated both ways, either as joy and bliss or as happiness, depending on the text. But then what's the difference between, let's say, joy and happiness? I mean, I don't really know. Perhaps you have an idea. To me, though, it seems as though happiness is a somewhat deeper and heavier kind of topic than joy. Joy seems to be something that may be fleeting, that might be impermanent in a moment-by-moment sense. That's the sort of thing that sort of comes and goes. Whereas happiness seems to be the sort of thing that lasts a bit longer, that might involve someone's entire life even. Happiness seems like it might be something more meaningful to us in some sense, more permanent even. There's a new study in psychology, a new sort of field of psychology called happiness studies. And this, I think, is very beneficial because so much of psychology historically, and for good reason, has been focused on dealing with unhappiness, dealing with the problems of life, dealing with how humans can overcome psychological difficulties or syndromes that are somehow that have us in their grip. However, I think there's also room in psychology, or should be, to try to investigate the better parts of life, the better parts of psychology, ways to make us more than just average, shall we say, to find ways to boost our happiness, our joy, our bliss in life. I think that's a good thing. It certainly is a fertile area of research right now, and it's just beginning, so I don't think we really have any firm conclusions yet, at least as far as I know. Now, on the other hand, some people have called the whole study of happiness into question because for some people it may seem as though that happiness studies is too la-di-da, is like trying to make us all find a way to be happy with injustice in the world, and that I don't think is the aim of it, but it certainly could be if it were misused to some extent. I mean, for example, there's the old phrase that religion is the opium of the people. This idea being that there are certain aspects to, let's say, religion, or to certain ways that we can approach, let's say, bliss and happiness, that may indeed keep us sort of sedated from parts of life that really we should be confronting. Let's say, like injustice, or that, the phrase from, I think it was from the book 1984, that ignorance is bliss. This idea being that we can gain bliss and perhaps even some kind of happiness by simply closing our eyes to parts of the world and being ignorant about them. And of course, if that's the way we're going with happiness, either in Buddhism or in psychology or wherever, then we're not doing ourselves any favors, because whatever happiness we gain is going to be, to an extent, temporary, of course, because eventually the walls will fall down upon us. And of course, it also is going to be a problem because other people are not going to be feeling that happiness. I mean, if we're closing our eyes to parts of the world that involve great harm and danger, then we're really not being very, shall we say, forward thinking in our pursuit of happiness. So there's a number of different issues here that we have to keep in mind when we're thinking about how to become happier. How to become happier in a global and sort of broader scale than just the limited kind of me right now. So in early Buddhism, there's really a strict hierarchy of kinds, or I should say, types of happiness, of intensities of happiness. They can also be described as types of joy, or extreme, from the lowest type of bliss, of joy, of happiness, all the way up to the most extreme form. And this hierarchy is stated in a number of texts, but basically the lowest level of happiness in early Buddhism is sensory happiness. That is to say, sensory joy, sensory pleasure, if you like. So sensory pleasures, getting involved in sense pleasures, say having a good meal, or seeing a beautiful landscape, or listening to great music, that is a kind of happiness, or it is a kind of joy. And again, we're dealing with the same word in the original language that's translated either way as sort of joy or happiness. And we're going to have to decide for ourselves to what extent these really do fit, which word might fit. Anyway, the idea being that at the low level of sensory happiness, or sensory joy, sensory pleasure, that's something that we deal with every day. We have sensory pleasures, things that we like. And that's usually where we're thinking of finding happiness. Usually most of us are thinking of finding happiness through one or another kind of sense pleasure. If we're not particularly feeling happy, we'll think, okay, well, let's go out and have a nice meal, or let's go to somewhere that's attractive, perhaps going on a vacation, or let's go and listen to some music for a while. That'll cheer me up. And usually it does. Because of sense pleasure, that is a kind of happiness. Now, for the Buddha, there were higher kinds of happiness that were involved in meditation, in meditative states. In particular, the states called jhana. Jhana states are states of deep absorptive meditation, and there's a ranking of them. Depending, the lower ones are the more sort of, I would say, rough and intense, in the sense of sort of being sort of bubbling and very strong in the way that we feel them. But as we go to higher and higher levels of jhana, this state becomes more and more refined. And the Buddha says that as we go up this ladder, the states become more and more pleasurable, because the earlier states have a more rough sort of a feel to them, and that rough feeling feels like pain, or feels like unpleasant from the point of view of the higher ones. And of course, sense pleasure even feels rougher than that. So we go up this kind of ladder, and eventually, at the top of these ladders of meditative states, meditative absorptions, we might say is the state of nirvana, or nibbana itself, the state of awakening itself. And nibbana, it is said, or nirvana, is the highest happiness. That's nibbanang paranang sukham is the sentence in Pali, the highest happiness within early Buddhism. And this is a little bit strange. I mean, on the one side, of course, it makes doctrinal sense that it would be the highest happiness. It's what we're looking for. We're looking for awakening, and so therefore, awakening has to be really the best kind of state. Therefore, the happiest, almost by definition. On the other hand, there's a sutta in which a monk, I believe it's a monastic, is asking about this. In fact, he's asking Sariputta, who was the Buddha's sort of most wise attendant, the most wise of his monastic followers. He's asking Sariputta about this, and he says, how is it that nirvana is basically the highest happiness? Because within nirvana, nothing is felt. That is, nirvana is supposed to be a state, when we're in nirvana, when we're actually in the state of being aware of it, so it's said in the early texts, is a state without any kind of feeling at all. And we have to understand that, as we go up this ladder of kind of meditative absorptions, they become more and more refined. So at the very top, it's the most refined, which is where there's really nothing felt at all. And Sariputta says that it is the highest happiness because nothing is felt. And this is a very weird kind of way of thinking of happiness, and indeed, it's paradoxical. It sort of doesn't really make sense. It certainly doesn't make sense, I think, from a lay sort of everyday perspective. But I think we can approach it from a different angle and sort of and think about how it might not be quite so strange, because to an extent, any kind of unbinding that we go through, any kind of relaxing of the sort of chains that hold us back, is in a sense increasing our happiness. And so, for example, in the Badiya Sutta, which is a sutta that I talked about in a recent video, a king, a person, Badiya, who used to be a king, a powerful ruler in India, he, of course, in his rulership, he had happiness. But once he renounced the rulership and retired into the monastic order and became a monastic and was out in the forest, he felt an even greater sense of happiness. He felt a greater sense of happiness because so much of the cares and worries of the kingdom were off of his shoulders. And so he was unbound by those cares and worries, and therefore was in a state where he said of complete bliss. Another way of understanding this is that we become happier as we renounce or give up the sort of stresses and worries that are involved in greed and hatred, which are states that really do keep us in sort of bound to the world in various ways, because we're either searching for things to make us happy, or we're pushing away things that don't make us happy, and we're reacting in a very strong emotional sense. And that itself is a kind of unhappiness while we're in it. Indeed, one of the highest forms of happiness within normal life is having what's called spiritual friends, or good friends who keep us on the straight and narrow in the path. And the Buddha has a very famous discussion with Ananda, where Ananda says spiritual friendship is half of the holy life, half of the life of practice. And the Buddha says, don't say that. Spiritual friendship is all of the life of practice. Having spiritual friends who can help us out on the path. And that is to say, friendship, which itself is not no feeling at all, but it's a kind of a feeling that's bringing us in the direction of renouncing those things that we no longer need. And as we learn the way to renouncing these things, we are freed more and more. At its base in early Buddhism, learning to free ourselves from dukkha, or from this sense of unsatisfactoriness and suffering in the world, learning to free ourselves from that emotionally is the source of happiness. And our happiness increases as we free ourselves from these bindings that make us feel like the world is unsatisfactory for us. And as this sense of dissatisfaction, this sense of suffering leaves us, it is replaced by bliss, or replaced by happiness. I was in a recent meditation group, and one of the people at the meditation group was noticing that for her, becoming happy, just as or blissful, or however you want to describe the state, is something that just happened as she got over her worries and concerns and obsessions. And that would happen during meditation. So it wasn't as though the happiness or the bliss was something separate from the getting rid of worries and concerns and obsessions, but it was almost as though the worries and concerns and obsessions were kind of like a covering over the happiness that and this is how it's sometimes described in the early text, as though the happiness is sort of there already, but just being covered up. That's how it sort of feels, covered up by these obsessions that we have, these worries, these concerns. And so that when these worries and concerns evaporate, and that's just another way of saying dukkha, or our feeling of unsatisfactoriness, dissatisfaction with life, as those things evaporate, the normal happiness sort of arises on its own. So since we've been dealing with terms in English, happiness versus bliss or joy, I think it's useful also to consider some of the antecedents to our ideas of happiness in the Western tradition. One from ancient Greece that we have in Western philosophy is the concept what's called eudaimonia. Eudaimonia was the aim towards which Greek philosophers believed that we should be striving. So what was the aim of ancient Greek philosophy was to try to find the good life. What was the good life? The good life was a life of eudaimonia. Now, eudaimonia, there's many ways of translating it. It can be translated as happiness, but usually I think a deeper and better translation, and nowadays it tends to be used more, is something like human flourishing. So eudaimonia is something like human flourishing. We should be able to find a way to flourish as people, as humans. Find a life of flourishing. And we might say, from what we've been discussing now, that once we get rid of this sort of covering of obsessions and worries and concerns, the human flourishing is then, or I should say, our humanity is allowed to flourish. And so human flourishing, a life of eudaimonia, simply occurs at that point, and that is really what happiness is. So you might say that one way of interpreting this nirvana being the highest happiness, that nothing is felt in nirvana, we might say that that's because really what we should take from that is nothing is felt that is worries, concerns, obsessions, that those things have gone away, that the greed and the hatred have gone away, that those kinds of things that we normally feel almost every moment of our lives have gone away. And that is what allows the happiness to arise, the natural kind of natural flourishing. And I think many of us will then find flourishing in, let's say, work that we enjoy. If we have a job that we enjoy doing, that can be an outlet for human flourishing. And of course, we will flourish better in that if we undertake it without the baggage that we've been trying to get away from, that we've been trying to unlearn, these concerns, these worries, these obsessions. Once those evaporate, then we're on a better track to, let's say, deal with a job that we enjoy, or even deal with a garden, just gardening, doing something to help nature flourish, let's say. Because I think we'll often find that happiness or flourishing arises when we undertake meaningful work, or work that to us is meaningful. Not to say it'll be necessarily meaningful to everybody. Everybody has different tastes. Everyone has different preferences. So for some of us, well, and it's very good that we do, because that way we can all be doing different things and helping one another. So some of us will find meaningful work in painting houses, and other ones will find meaningful work in doing plumbing, and other ones in gardening, and whatever it might be. So that's great. That's how we live together. That's how we can share this world and help one another. But also, we should keep in mind that another way of finding this kind of flourishing through work is through a path like the Eightfold Path. And one of, I think, the upshots of happiness studies, which, as I say, we don't really have a whole lot of, I don't think a whole lot of solid information yet, but some at least plausible kinds of things that come out of it are that if we have a path in our lives, if we have a sort of a direction that we're taking, that tends to make us happier just by having that path. And of course, just by sharing that path with other people of like mind, that we can sort of feel like we're in this together and that we're helping one another out. Whatever that path might be. It might be a path of doing gardening, or it might be a path of doing whatever work you do. But for many of us, it can also be a path of practice, of ethical practice, of a practice towards wisdom, of a practice of meditation. Just being on a path like that can make you happier. Now, and this is irrespective of where we are in that path. We might just be beginning it. The path may not be anywhere close to being complete by any stretch of the imagination. We've got all kinds of issues coming up. But just by doing that path, just by undertaking it and saying, I'm making an intention to undertake this path, you can increase, I think, and at least I think some of the happiness studies show, you can increase to an extent, even if it's a little bit small, your feeling of happiness with your own life, your feeling of satisfaction, of bliss, of joy. Put your own thoughts down below about this, what you think makes you happy. And if you are finding happiness in these videos of mine, consider checking out my Patreon page. It's linked down below, and help out the channel and the work that we're all doing here. And I hope we'll catch you on the next one of these videos. So meanwhile, all of you be well.